For this etching tutorial, you're going to need some Armor Etch cream. If you can't find Armor Etch, I found a brand called Cadence at a local P&A. It's quite a bit cheaper, not as good as Armor Etch, but it'll do the trick. You'll need one paintbrush. I like to use a slightly flatter paintbrush, and you'll see why in a bit. You will also need a pair of gloves, as etching cream is an acid and you should take the necessary precautions. You should as well also wear a mask and work in a well-ventilated area to avoid any kind of skin reactions, and especially if you are very sensitive to these kinds of things. I'm not particularly sensitive, so I'm just going to be using gloves in this video, but please remember that if you are particularly sensitive, make sure to take the necessary safety precautions. You're also going to need some adhesive vinyl. I'm going to be using a piece of scrap vinyl, as I tend to put my scraps in here and then never look at them again. So I'm going to try and kind of, make use of these. You're also going to need some alcohol swabs to wipe down the glass, and even for a few things a little bit later on. And then lastly, you're going to need a glass. With etching, you don't have to use a brand new glass. Of course, it'll look nicer on a brand new glass, especially if it's a gift. But in this case, I'm going to be using an old glass, and I'm going to be showing you that you can also use it on old glasses as well. My name is Kelly, and let's get clacking. We're going to start off by choosing a design in Design Space. So I'm going to go to the Images panel, and I'm going to just search through what's popular at the moment. Now, what we need to remember about the design that we choose is a few things. Number one, it can't be too big, because as we're dealing with a rounded surface like this, as you can see, it's not perfectly straight. So what happens is you'll end up getting little crinkles on the vinyl, and your etching cream will go underneath that, and then you won't have a very good etch. So you want to have something that's not too big, and you also want to have something that's not too intricate as well, as you do tend to move the etching cream around with the brush quite a lot. So you need to make sure that you're not going to be pulling the vinyl off the glass. So we're just going to scroll a little bit. This one is the one that I want. So now we need to make sure that we have the sizing correct. I always like to take the glass that I'm using, give it a little bit of a measure, try and see how big I want it on the glass. Now I don't really want it very much bigger than that, which is around 7 centimeters or so. So I'm just going to use the resizing arrows at the bottom, and I'm going to drag it to the right size. So let's make it 7 centimeters by 7.2 centimeters. Now that your design is on your canvas, we can go to the Make It panel. Now what you want to remember with etching is that you don't want to just cut it at the top of the vinyl. You want to move it down so that you have space on every side of the sticker, because you're essentially going to be brushing on the Armor Etch paste. And if you don't have a wide enough gap on the vinyl, then you may actually get the Armor Etch cream on the part of the glass that you don't want to have etched. So you just need to make sure that you have a little bit of a leeway on either side. And this piece of vinyl I'm using is about 15 by 14 or so. So I'm going to put it somewhere over there, just so we have, space on either side. And of course, because we're etching it directly onto the glass, we don't need to worry about mirroring it either. So you just cut it non-mirrored, just like that. And then we cut. Okay, now we have our design cut, and we're going to obviously just pull it off the page, and then we're going to weed it. Now, of course, with normal weeding, what you would do is you would take the excess off the vinyl piece. But because we're using etching, we want this part to show. So we're going to need to remove what we want to show on the glass. We're going to need to remove that off the vinyl. So let's start with that. Now, of course, you do need to be very careful about these little inside bits. As you can see, they tend to lift up if you're not watching what you're doing. So what I like to do is I like to take the weeding tool, press it down on the inside section, and then pull the other section back, and then grip it from the other side if I'm having an area that's particularly problematic. Then, as you can see, it works perfectly. And if you have a section that has lifted up, then you can just lift it up with your weeding tool and then place it back down again. If you have the right cut, you should be able to see the indentation of the cut mark on your paper. So you see there, we can see the indentation of the cut mark, so we know exactly where to place this. Now we can get out our transfer tape and put our transfer tape over the decal and transfer it to the glass. I have an old piece of transfer tape, so I'm just going to reuse that. It doesn't quite fit the entire section, but that's okay. So what we're doing now is we're just getting all of the bubbles out so that the vinyl will stick to the transfer tape. And then what we can do is we can flip it over and even pull that out there like that. Then flip it over. What I like to do with this method is literally bring the backing of the vinyl back 180 degrees. So it's flush against here. So now you won't have any problems with the letters, or you shouldn't have any problems with the letters sticking to the vinyl or to the tape. It should all just come off because you're kind of forcing it off the tape, off the backing and onto the transfer tape, which is what we have. And look at that. That's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Could not have gone better, even if I'd planned it. And now that's stuck to my desk. Now I'm going to put some gloves on because I don't want grubby paw marks on my glass, even though we're going to wipe it down with some rubbing alcohol first. Okay, so I just use these alcohol swabs and then we just wipe the glass down. So I'm going to do the whole glass because why not? Now I've just taken out 2 packets of wet wipes. You may think I'm a bit strange, but I'm actually going to do that because I want to lay the glass in between them just to be able to have the glass at a nice workable angle. This also works with towels. You can take a hand towel or something, roll it up, turn it over and then put the glass in the middle. Some people have also made some out of like pipes, PVC pipes, and then foam. So you can use foam that's rolled over, or a pool noodle. I'm not sure if they're called pool noodles in the US or other places in the world. I'm sorry if they aren't. I probably said something very confusing then. So you're going to notice there's going to be lots of crinkles in this vinyl on the cup. There's loads of room for error on this one, but we're just going to try and get it. I mean, the text is also slanted, so getting it 100% straight doesn't really matter for this one, but we're going to try anyway. And then what I like to do is I like to fold it in half and lay it from the center inwards. So you can even do this from an angle if you prefer, so that you can see exactly where the design is going onto on the cup. So you can put it down there. And then what you do is you just flatten it out in the middle, working your way out. Now I like to do this quite slowly because especially with curved glasses like this, it does get a little bit tricky and you sometimes struggle with not being able to get the wrinkles out properly. So you're going to need to keep some scissors at hand so that you can cut the vinyl and lay it correctly. But it doesn't always work that well with this kind of thing. If this was the negative, then that would work perfectly. But when you're doing this kind of thing, sometimes you'll need to take that approach and sometimes not. Stretch that out there. So like I said, just go really slowly, little bits at a time. And don't worry too much about sticking it down all the way on the edges. You just need to cover this. You need to make sure that there are no bubbles on this section, that there are no bubbles on the edges, that you are having everything lined up properly. See, like there, tiny bit of a problem. So this is a section here that I'm probably going to cut, or that I'm going to cut. So what I do here is I just cut it a little bit like that, and then you lay the one side in underneath like that. Let's just take the transfer tape off here. What we're essentially doing is we're putting the one tape there and the other tape is going to be going slightly overlapping it. So we're just going to put it on top of each other and then stick it down. And then burnishing it just to make sure that we've got everything stuck down properly. You can also check from the other side to see how well you've burnished things. That for me is a nice way of telling how well you've done. Before we remove the transfer tape, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a burnishing with our tool, just to make sure that all the little bits are stuck. And again, you can check it from the other side to see up close if you have any gaps and things. We look good. And again, same as with the transfer tape, pull it off flush or flush to the glass so that you have all your bits staying. Now for the fun part. So we take our Armor Etch cream, and like I mentioned, this is an acid, so please be careful. Please make sure to take the necessary steps. Do as I say, not as I do. So I've just given it a little bit of a shake just to make sure that all of the bits are floating properly. And then we're going to, it's one of those child-proof locks, which means that I'm going to struggle to open it. So it says, while pushing down, turn. So you obviously push it down and then turn. So as you can see, it's a white liquid that we're going to use. I'm just going to put it off to the side. And like I mentioned, I like to use a flat brush because I find it's a lot easier to work with. And then when it comes to the first layer, I like to just get a very thin layer going. So that for me is just to make sure that the reaction starts everywhere. And thereafter, I like to go in with a slightly thicker coat just to make sure that there is enough acid everywhere. Enough acid to go around. Nobody's getting FOMO'd. Everybody's getting covered. And then kind of what you do for the next couple of minutes is you just swish it around a little bit. You don't have to add a crazy amount of Armor Etch. You can if you want to make sure that you're absolutely going to get everything, but you really don't have to. Just try and make sure that you keep the coatings even and that there's not like big gaps and sections where it's left off, because obviously whatever you leave off won't actually etch properly. Now this is probably the amount of etching cream that I'm going to be using. So now what I'll do is I'll just kind of swish it around for a few minutes. It will start to thicken a little bit. Some people do say that you can put it back into the bottle, which I mean you probably can. There's so much in this bottle and it goes so far that you probably don't need to, but you totally can. Okay, I've probably been etching this for far longer than I needed to. I tend to do that, kind of go a little bit crazy. But what I like to do now before washing all of the etching cream off and pulling off the stencil, because once you've pulled off the vinyl stencil, you're not going to get it back on again at the right spot. So if you haven't gotten the perfect etch, you're kind of a little bit stuffed. So what I like to do at this stage is to take my rubbing alcohol swab. I mean, you can even brush off the excess Armor Etch just in case you are a little bit scared that it didn't work so lacquer. And you can brush it off, wipe down one section of the glass. You also need to bear in mind that this is now wet, so you won't see it look as good as what you normally would when it's dry. So what you can do is you can then take a little paper towel or something like that and dry it off to see if it actually etched properly. While we wait for that to dry off a little bit more, I'm just going to move the etching cream around, because you shouldn't, and it works best when you move it around. I think it's because when you're placing the etching cream down, you may have a little bit more in one spot than you do in another. So by moving the etching cream around, you're then making sure that you're covering all the spots. Or statistically speaking, you're covering all the spots. So that's a little bit drier, and there's quite a bit of splotching that you can see there. So I'm not very happy with that. So I'm going to put some more etching cream on. And of course, like I said, had we just taken the etching cream off, that wouldn't have looked very nice. That wouldn't have etched properly. Etching is of course an acid, which essentially burns the outside of the glass. So you need to make sure that you're burning it evenly. If you are enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more of a similar type of content. I also have a Patreon, so if you would like to support the channel, consider signing up on Patreon. We do monthly calls, there's another exclusive live stream on Patreon, there's podcasts, monthly challenges, those kinds of things, which is a lot of fun, so I hope to see you there. Okay, it has been rinsed off, and now is the moment of truth to see whether it has worked or not. Now what we can also do is we can lift up a small section, but I can see that it's worked because the etching is beautiful. You can kind of see how rough it is, and you can hear how rough it is as well. So I'm pretty happy with that result so far. Let's pull off this little section. Ooh, it's so difficult to catch this on the... There we go. You can see the difference there. Stunning. Okay, so now we pull the whole thing off. It's stuck. Hey, that works so much better. I've never actually... This is the first time I'm trying that. So, scraping tool. Winning. Okay, now this particular vinyl left a very gummy residue on the glass. You can see it especially there. So let's just try and clean that off a little. Makes the etching look very chach. For all of you who don't know what that means, it just means it doesn't look very nice, which I'm sure you can gather in any case. And then we take some more of our alcohol swabs and we try and remove all of the gunk, all the gummy residue, bouncing here and there and everywhere. And of course, because the etching cream burns the glass, you don't need to worry about rubbing it off. Like, you can't see it now because it's wet, but the moment that it dries up, it'll look just as what it did before. Now, this won't happen with every vinyl. This is actually the first time that that's happened. And I think it was just this particular vinyl that I was using. So you can really use any vinyl. Old vinyl, removable vinyl, expired vinyl. I think that's just a mark on the inside of the glass. Yeah. Chop. Okay, and that is beautiful. So we can see here, what works nicely is if you put something like black on the inside, then you tend to see it a little bit better. So that you can see it much nicer. We can go up close and you can see the etching. There's just a little bit of etching cream that got on there. That was where we overlapped. I obviously didn't press it down hard enough, so just make sure you look out for that. But other than that, it is perfect. Now, if you are in the US and you have things like rub and buff, I honestly have no idea what the South African equivalent is of that yet. I haven't tried it out. You can put the rub and buff over it and then make this a color. So you can make it like gold or whatever colors rub and buff comes in. I have no idea. It is something that I will be trying. So if you want me to try that, please give this video a thumbs up and let me know if you want me to try it in the comments. A huge thank you for coming along with me today. I hope you learned something. I hope you conquered your fear of etching, and I hope to see you in my next video. And remember, be kind to someone today. See you soon.